A survey titled SAPS Trust Indicator by Action Society shows there's a lack of faith in South Africa's police. And to share more on the findings, we're joined now by Cameron. He's the Director of Community Safety at Action Society. Cameron, good to have you on tonight here on News at Prime. Talking about the methodology first of how this survey was conducted and what the questions were, what questions were asked to the community.
Sure. So let me start with the reason for the survey. For the past probably 2 to 3 months, especially with regards to gender-based violence, we've received increased complaints from several members of the public, interestingly enough, from a large amount of different communities throughout the country, that it just feels as though if they call SAPS, either no one shows up or it takes very long, etc., etc. And we just thought, let's start a basic process of asking people whether 10111 is your number one. Is it your number one emergency number? And that's where the process started. So it's a very basic survey. It's still actually a process. It was only launched earlier this week. The article that I assume you've seen saying 90% of South Africans don't trust SAPS is based on preliminary results of about 4,000 people that participated in the first 2 days. And we basically asked, have you ever phoned 10111 in an emergency? If so, how long do you think it will take them to arrive if the call is successful? Do you only report crime to SAPS for insurance purposes? And then the last question we ask is, who would you rather call in an emergency? Is it private security, SAPS, or a neighborhood watch?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was going to come to that. If there is no faith in 10111, where would they go? But before we get there, let's talk about then exactly that question. How many actually use that number just for lodging a case and getting a case number and going to get an insurance claim?
I don't have the exact newest number, but what I can say from the last report that I read, I know SAPS has a major challenge when calls do go through, that they receive an alarming amount of hoax calls, which we obviously condemn in the strongest possible way, because as you can imagine, it's crucial for that line to be open for people that really need help. But unfortunately, it's not always the challenge in terms of the person on the other side of the phone that might not always understand or might not be trained well enough to handle the situation. But it's also technical challenges. Sometimes people just don't get through. You know, I tested the line this week and I called. It didn't even ring. The line just dropped after a while. And that's a similar kind of complaint that we are getting from a lot of people.
Yeah. How often do you conduct these SAPS Trust Indicator surveys?
This is the first one we've conducted, and as I say, it starts because of gender-based violence. Now, as you know, in South Africa, we've got about 153 rapes per day. Only 1 in 9 rapes, as we know, are reported. And sexual offences in the country have less than an 8% conviction rate. So very worrying. And although 10111 is a reactive measure, it's not a proactive measure, there's something that needs to work, because this is just another way that the SAPS in crisis, the whole issue around the South African Police Service at the moment, is basically failing to give justice to people. And it's one of the first steps that we can really get boots on the ground, make arrests, and make sure that an investigation is done properly to have a successful conviction.
Yeah. So this is an indicator to see the trust that people have in the police in an emergency situation. In 2021, you conducted another one indicating a dip in trust generally, sitting at as low as 27%. You're saying that was or appeared to have been linked to the July social unrest. How would you, when you're looking at both these surveys, link this general lack or trust deficit in police? What would you attribute it to?
I think there are a few factors that we need to take into consideration. The specific survey you're talking about was called the Human Sciences Research Council survey, and it measured it from a period of 2010 up until 2021. And it was interesting that specifically the Western Cape, Limpopo, and Gauteng had figures that were quite drastically below the national average, which was only 27%. So a province like the Western Cape was trailing the national average by less than 7%. So it's about 20%. Now, it's a very low trust indicator. Nevertheless, I think the major challenges that keep on coming up, firstly, is the lack of effective and competent leadership in the South African Police Service. Time and again, we hear that cadre deployment, political influence plays a major role, and that is obviously linked to corruption as well, which, as we all know, it's a major issue in law enforcement across the country. And if we don't stop that, we'll see more dudulas, we'll see more issues in Diepsloot, because the root cause of all of these issues is obviously unemployment, education, and a massive problem is the criminal justice system. South Africans, especially in poorer communities, are sick and tired of being left vulnerable because of government not being or taking responsibility for their constitutional mandate.
Right. Now, of course, the communities, the public and the police need to be striving continually for this participation and this working together. What are the alternatives here? How can public confidence in the police be built at this particular point, considering, of course, all these factors that are leading to this challenge of a trust deficit that we are seeing?
Yes, I think there are about 4 or 5 points that can make an incredible difference in fixing the challenges that we face and restoring some of the trust issues that communities have in SAPS at the moment. And I'll quickly just summarize them. I think the first one is we need to have a skills audit done of all senior members in the police. This includes provincial commissioners, divisional commissioners, and their deputies, to determine have they been appointed because of merit or were they appointed because of political affiliation? Because especially when it comes to national positions, we've seen that many political appointments were made and obviously had dire consequences. The second one is that we need to make sure that we've got a resource availability for crime intelligence development. Our crime intelligence capacity is very broken right across the country. We don't have specialized units, and these two need to work hand in hand. If we don't have that, we can't be proactive. We can't prevent serious crime before it happens. And then the last two, firstly, we need to re-implement reservists across the country. It's a cost-effective way of basic visible policing. And I think the last one, which is crucial for transparency's sake in SAPS, is to have all senior members, as a start, do polygraph tests to see if they have been involved in corruption. Because I'm afraid I can't really say with trust that I believe that the majority of senior members in SAPS are not part or do not know of senior corruption in the rest of the South African Police Service.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, one would look at that and say what Ed is calling for probably are technical requirements or technical proposition. Somebody who's walking on the streets of Diepsloot will not be thinking, did you have a polygraph test? What's your qualification or whatnot? What they really do want to feel is being treated with respect. They want to know that the police is the protector, not the perpetrator. And that to me is probably what immediately needs to happen in changing that perception in society currently, from the police being perpetrators more than protectors.
I think you have just summarized it perfectly. In fact, I would like us to go as far as saying that that is why we're calling for such a drastic reform in terms of leadership. Once we do that, it will make it much easier to filter through to lower ranks. But if the South African Police Service is rotten at the top, if we've got a Minister of Police that is not competent, he doesn't know what he's doing, he breaks all sorts of forensic protocol when he visits crime scenes, etc. He even speaks to suspects on camera in front of the media, Rosettenville as an example. Then we cannot expect ground-level members to always handle themselves professionally and make sure that we've got a professional service. We need to make sure that from the top down, we build SAPS. But just keeping the older guys and ladies that are well-trained on ground level and maintaining them for the time being is not going to be enough. We need to have a drastic overhaul of the entire service, make sure the top level is competent, and work down from there.
Is there a way where we can create practical mechanisms to ensure some routine citizen oversight and influence over law enforcement?
Absolutely. You know, I think that the appointment of the new National Commissioner is a perfect example. And I'm not going to get into the technicalities of General Masemola. His professional record is not a bad record, but it wasn't a transparent process. It was a perfect opportunity for the Minister of Police and the President to say, hey, public, take part in this. At least see what we are doing. These are the 24 candidates. These are the questions we're asking. These are the qualifications we're considering. Go through the process with the public. Make them part of it. You know, Georgia, the country, has a very interesting example. They struggled with corruption about 2-3 decades ago very badly. In fact, I think it was even worse in South Africa. And what they ended up doing, they restructured the entire police. And the new police headquarters, the entire building is built of glass. And it basically stood for transparency. It might sound like a simple example, but the point is there's a perfect or a great opportunity for the current political leadership to say, I want to win the trust. But now Ramaphosa goes within a month after sacking the previous commissioner, and behind closed doors, they have many interviews. No one knows the reasons or the merit for the appointment, and boom, we've got another national commissioner. And nothing else is looked at in terms of reform in the police, and we still have the wrong police minister. So I would start with that. We need an open public process. I would have appointed an external panel of policing experts and maybe include some senior members of the police, have a public process to choose the commissioner. And this is the same example that we need right through.
Right, much appreciated there. That's Ian Cameron. He is the Community Safety Director at Action Society.